Hello and welcome. My name is Belma Sadikovic, and I'm the Curriculum and Content Coordinator with ACRO. It is a pleasure to have you here today with the Welcome Corps on Campus Consortium partners and representatives from University of Indiana and SoCA University of America as they share insights and experiences in admitting and supporting refugee students on their campuses through the Welcome Corps on Campus program. And today's session will cover overview of Welcome Corps on Campus. We will talk about how Welcome Corps on Campus selects students and places them at U.S. institutions of higher education. We will also share insights from two participating institutions. We have, as I said, Indiana University and SoCA University of America, and we will have plenty of time for Q&A. And with this, I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have Christina Chandler with us, placement advisor, joining us from the Institute of International Education, and Warsame, our senior program officer at World University Service of Canada. We have Chris Adams, senior associate director of international admissions at Indiana University. Delgar Woodruff, also from Indiana University, Associate Director of Admission. And we have Dr. Andrew Woolsey, Dean of Enrollment Services from SoCA University of America. So we encourage you to interact with us. So please put your name and what school you're joining us from in chat so we can get to know each other. Throughout the webinar, we will be putting important links and information in the chat, so please keep an eye on that. There will be plenty of time, as I said, for questions after the presentation. Please ask your questions using the Q&A feature. You can ask your questions at any time, and you can ask anonymously as well. And last but not least, this webinar is recorded and it will be available on our ACRO website within the next 48 hours. And one thing I would like to reiterate is please note that this session is not intended for refugee students interested in applying for the program and not intended for those interested in Welcome Corps. This session will solely focus on Welcome Corps on campus. We won't be able to respond to any questions about Welcome Corps, including questions about status of application, eligibility, or any other questions related to the program. If you would like to contact the Welcome Corps, you can do so by going to their website, and I will also post the website as well as the email that you can inquire. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Christina to start us off. Thank you, Christina.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to provide a little bit of background on the Welcome Corps on Campus before we get to our guest speakers today. I wanted to share that the Welcome Corps, under which is the Welcome Corps on Campus, is the boldest innovation in refugee resettlement in 4 decades, creating a new opportunity for everyday Americans to engage directly in refugee resettlement through private sponsorship. This is independent of and complementary to existing avenues for volunteering with resettlement agencies. Through the Welcome Corps, groups of 5 or more individuals apply to form a campus sponsor group, and we'll actually hear from 2 participating campuses today. They welcome refugee newcomers into local communities and directly assist them as they build new lives in the United States. So the Welcome Corps on Campus, which is an expansion of the Welcome Corps, leverages the capacity of U.S. campuses to serve as resettlement spaces and provide academic opportunities for refugee students. Through Welcome Corps on Campus, refugee students receive academic and community support as they adapt to life in America and begin their studies in the U.S. Campus sponsors work together to welcome refugee students approved for resettlement by the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program by providing services necessary for their cultural, social, and academic adjustment. So we need to talk a little bit about the role of the campus sponsor group, because that's where the private sponsorship comes in for welcoming the students. Campuses interested in sponsoring 1 or more refugee students at their institutions must form a sponsor group. These sponsor groups, in collaboration with institutional leadership, must demonstrate that they can provide the core sponsorship services for the sponsorship period of 12 months. This is the first 12 months that the students would be in the US. Sponsor groups are made up of at least 5 American citizens or lawful permanent residents who are over the age of 18 and who are directly connected to the campus. This can be a student, a staff, or a faculty member. Every sponsor group has a primary contact or lead coordinator, and the sponsor group should consist of a diverse set of campus stakeholders to provide academic, logistical, and peer-to-peer support. We recommend especially having someone from admissions on the sponsor group if possible. So the campus sponsors commit to providing the core sponsorship services to sponsored refugee students for a minimum of 12 months. This is the initial sponsorship period. And in coordination with institutional support, campus sponsor groups commit to securing full financial, academic, and integration support. So this can range from anything from picking the student up from the airport the first time they arrive in the US, to making sure that they have housing and basic necessities covered. It's also really important that you help them understand the new transportation system in their new city or help them enroll in classes. Really anything that could come up is something that the sponsor group would assist the student with. So the Welcome Corps on Campus is a program of the Department of State, of Bureau of Population of Refugees and Migration. And it's implemented by a consortium of organizations with expertise in higher education and refugee resettlement. So IIE is here to talk about academic placement. Also part of the consortium is the Community Sponsorship Hub, Every Campus a Refuge, NASH, President's Alliance, and WUSC. And I'm excited to hand it off to my colleague Warsame at WUSC. They help us with all of the selection of the students, so he's going to be able to talk to you a little bit about that process.
Thank you, Christina. Hello, everybody. We'll give you a little bit of background of the student identification and selection. As many of you could understand, the majority of refugees are located in refugee camps across many countries of the world. And so before we open up call for applications so students can apply the Welcome Corps on Campus, what we do is we recognize that the challenges in accessibility in refugee camps, access to information and internet. So we have our colleagues who also go in person and then do community outreach, like in different refugee settlements in the countries where the Welcome Corps on Campus now is working. So ahead of time, we talk about the program, we talk about the application process, we talk about the eligibility and requirements, and then so that at least the potential applicants will get ready. And so the time we let them know that the time the call for application will start, the documentations that are needed. So the call for applications is purely online, so that to make it more accessible to different people located in different locations. We also collaborate with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to also help those potential applicants with internet accessibility, so that to give them access to computers so that during the call for applications. So then the call for applications is launched and applicants apply. So we have 2 to 3 weeks time, depending on the location. So when the call for application is open, potential applicants submit the applications online, what they could also simply do. It's very simplified ways they can do from a smartphone, from a laptop, from a desktop. And they will submit the documentations needed for the program. What we also try to do is special considerations. We encourage refugees who might have physical impairment or any disability. So as I said earlier, we also collaborate with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who support refugees as well, whether it is wheelchair accessibility, whether it is people who have a hearing challenge. or visual challenge as well to get some interpreters who help them to submit the application, and also during the interviews. After we receive on our applications, which is really very huge given compared to the available spaces that we have, we now go through those applications, and then we do document verifications. As you understand, the Welcome Corn campus, as Christine was saying earlier, is combining on refugee resettlement to access to higher education. So it is two things. So applicants should be should meet the criteria for access to, higher education in the United States, as well as United States refugee admission program. So documentations will pertain both groups, that documents that are proving the refugee status, and other documentation that are proving the academic ability. So general, the eligibility is a young person who is from 18 to 24 years old, and having minimum of C level grade. So different countries, it's for example, in Kenya, it is C. In Jordan, where that's the next country that where the Welcome Corn campus also in operational, the moment is also similar to that. We use that benchmark, and the refugee to have a recognized refugee status by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the country of asylum where they're located. So when we verify all those documentations, and it takes time to verify all those documentations, then when we get those verifications checked out, then depending on how many spaces we have, so we shortlist, and then those students who meet the general criteria are requested to write English proficiency test. We usually use Duolingo because of its accessibility, and it has AI to help on the test. And after that, then depending on how many spaces we have, we interview at least 2 people per space, and then that is the time that the in-person interviews start. So in-person interviews, we do at the refugee settlements. Some refugees who are located in urban settings, we also do in urban settings as well. Basically, the interviews pertain mostly checking that the academic curiosity of the applicants, the level of the academic based on the United States and universities and colleges, and also refugee claim, which also based what we also assess that the admissibility to the United States refugee admission program, and the general suitability as integration of that young person who's applying at the program. So as we understand that the refugees locate in different countries, in different situations, sometimes they don't have all the documentations that might be required, and so that you can see that applicants, they will have their own documents. They will have their high school certificates. Some of them may have on transcripts, some of them might not have. Some schools do not provide, and those who provide, they will just give the person in hand. It's not necessarily that the school will submit on their behalf the transcript. So giving consideration all on the situations and the bureaucracy and the different the systems in every country. So we deal with that. We work with experts in local academic systems and documentations to verify. So we also verify the documentations with issue authorities, education authorities, and refugee authorities in the countries of asylum. And after we complete the interview assessment, then we offer a letter which lets the applicant that now they are part of that pool. Then after that, the placement starts. So then until there, and then that is how the process happens. So over to you, back to Christina.
Yeah, so once the students have been selected by WUSC, as Warsame was just describing, IIE facilitates the application process and the placement process for the students. So we help match the refugee students based on their overall fit and their academic fit with the participating institutions. This involves helping the students fill out an online application that mirrors the Common App. So we get a full academic history for each student. We collect the academic documents that Warsame was just describing, and we put that together in a dossier to send to admission offices so that you can review the student for admission. And that final admission decision always lies with the admission office of the participating institution. So we will present you with the student we think would be a great fit, but ultimately the decision to admit them or not is yours. And we are submitting applications for students who are interested in enrolling in either an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. So depending on their academic qualifications and the programs available at the participating institutions, it could be for either a 2-year or a 4-year undergraduate degree. But we're very lucky to have representatives from 2 institutions who are participating in our first cohort for the Welcome Quran campus. So I want to hand it over to Indiana University with Chris and Delgar to talk about their experience.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, so to go over a bit of history in regard to assisting displaced students, we at Indiana University, we have a few decades of history assisting students, but we didn't really formalize a network to support this population until about 2018. It was at that time that we engaged ACRO, IIE, stayed connected with President's Alliance, the other networks that you saw listed, and we assisted in setting best practice for U.S. institutions in admitting this population. And from that, from the connections, networking with everybody else in kind of the same realm, we decided to try to set up a task force to directly support incoming students from displaced backgrounds. So what that looked like was we brought together a steering committee, which was primarily myself, a director of student services, and the director of international admissions at the time. And we submitted a proposal to our administration to essentially directly support 10 new students each year with the goal of having 40 active population at any given time once we got into those years. So we were successful. That was approved. We set up a task force, and we have over 20 people just from around campus and the community involved. We have a local resettlement agency, local charity groups, in addition to myself, Delgar with domestic admissions, financial aid office. You can imagine housing and residential program services. So any office that would be directly involved with helping this population, we identified a person who was passionate and willing to help. And so we had kind of a one-stop shop for these students to contact us, and then we could provide them direct assistance. So that's what we've been doing since 2018, 2019. COVID interrupted that slightly. And then most recently, we became a pioneer of the Welcome Quran campus, and we're welcoming our first students this fall. And as of right now, I believe we have 34 directly supported students. So we're getting close to that 40 mark that we really want to see. And I just like to say, Welcome Corps, in comparison to the other ones we've worked with just individually, really easy, streamlined process. It's been great working with IIE to get these students here. We're looking forward to continuing to work with the program and maintaining our goal, but also increasing the population as we're able to support them. Delgar, is there anything else you want to add? I'll also say that my role is in international missions, so understanding that international curriculum is an important piece, but these students are coded as domestic admits since they have a domestic U.S. status, whether it be refugee, asylee, any of those. So it really takes offices working together. So in our case, Delgar and I work together. The application will go through Delgar's office, but my team will assist in reviewing the international coursework. So there is some collaboration, cooperation required. But yeah, Delgar, anything else you would like to add from your point of view?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Chris said. It's been really great working with IAE and Christina specifically. It has been super helpful to have the open communication that we've had with each other between us and IAE to get these students through the process. It is not easy going through the college admission process for any student, especially if you were a part of this population. So the amount of communication that we have, the ability to help students like get through this process in a streamlined way has been really important. The other thing that I appreciate is that the Welcome Corps on campus, they're able to, if they send you a dossier of everything, but the way that our process works is all our applications are electronic, so they're able to submit those electronic copies and really fall into our processing of applications. So again, it's been really helpful and really great to work with this group. So I would, the communication has been really awesome. Otherwise, I mostly am here to represent the process end because, like Chris said, they help us review the international documentation for admissibility into the university. But in terms of a process, it's been really easy um, to put the Welcome Core on campus process into our existing processes and be able to admit these students and welcome them to campus.
Maybe we'll turn it over now to Andrew at SOCA, and then after that, we can open it up for questions for either Indiana or SOCA.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christina. Appreciate it. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Woolsey. I'm the Dean of Enrollment Services at SOCA University of America. I want to thank ACRO and IEE and Welcome Corps for all of their support through this process. It's been wonderful. Briefly, just wanted to mention a little bit about SUA. We are very different than IU. We're much smaller. We're a small liberal arts college. We were initially founded in 1987 and offered a one MA in TESOL, and then expanded in 2001 to include an undergraduate liberal arts program with 5 broad concentrations, and relocated our campus to Aliso Viejo, which is in Orange County, California. Our enrollment's much smaller. We have about 500 students total on our campus, and we generally bring in about 125 to 135 new students every year, 50% of which are international and 50% which are domestic. And we also still offer a small graduate program in ed leadership, which was established in 2013. Again, we were founded as a Buddhist principles of on the Buddhist principles of peace, human rights, and the sanctity of life. However, our curriculum is non-sectarian. Undergraduates are required to study a non-native language and study abroad for a semester in a country where a language is spoken, and the cost of this is included in their tuition. Undergraduates also are eligible for, if they come from family incomes below 90,000 and who demonstrate financial need, have their tuition covered by a combination of grants, scholarships in the form of university, federal, and state governments and private agencies funded. So I just want to kind of give a little bit of a distinction between IU and SUA. What I wanted to kind of just focus on was a little bit about the admissions review process. I think early on in our partnership with Welcome Corps and IEE, WUS's guidance on the student identification, which Warsami just generally outlined, was exceptionally well done. The context in which they provided the foundational resources and webinars that we had prior to were incredibly important to us, really reframing the purpose of this program and what we were trying to do. Learning that the program and the competitive interview and documentation gathering process and the relationship that the program had with students, I think it was a 12 to 18 month selection process during the asylum period, was important, just to really understanding sort of that we are still living in a time of historic displacement for these students. I think one of the references made was resettlement is, I think, 1%, perhaps less than 1%. So really setting the stage for the context in which where these students were coming from was incredibly important to us when we were going into the review process and review stage. Welcome Corps, again, another aspect of admissions work that I think is important that many admissions officers focus on is how do we bring an application to completion? And it seemed that the pre-work that Welcome Corps and Christina at IEE, their team were doing to help facilitate that process was incredibly reassuring as an institution. Again, there was an incredible extensive security vetting process through the Department of State, through US RAP, that went through this process. So that again really helped us understand contextually where these students were coming from. Completed secondary schooling credentials were acquired, English language proficiency, which is really core because all of our instruction is in English. Understanding that that there was a support-based or through English delivery was incredibly important to again framing the context. We also saw this as really sort of an opportunity for us to demonstrate our commitment to holistic review. Of course, the program certainly had sort of a mission alignment with our own institution. That was the first starting point for us. But again, applying context and circumstantial factors to a student's potential capacity. And I really want to focus on that. Potential capacity is important because oftentimes I think in our process or as we review, we're assessing what has already been done as opposed to what the potential is for students in the future, given the opportunity. So looking at access barriers, educational resources that the student may have had access to in their own current experience. Did they have a loss of family? Were they growing up in a conflict situation? Were they forced to learn a second language as a result of a displacement? Did they have lack of basic needs during their studies? Were they working full-time? All of those were really important things for our admission staff to take into context when reviewing these applicants. And really, I think what emerged was just the resilience of these students, how that in despite of a lot of the circumstances that they've faced, they were positive examples for their peers. So really reframing context in our work and understanding how that fit with our institutional context was really what we did in terms of our approach to this process. Of course, understanding, as Christina mentioned, that the final decision always lied with the admissions office was reassuring, knowing that there was, still that opportunity for dialogue if there were situations that we needed clarity for, IE and did a phenomenal job of helping facilitate that process, particularly for a first year cohort. So it was a really, really rewarding to go through. We had previous experiences as well with working with similar type of programming. We'd work with a local organization here in South Orange County, California, called the TIA Foundation. And the TIA Foundation creates communities of support and organizes access to economic opportunities and critical resources for immigrants, refugees, and displaced Indigenous communities. Through their work, they foster the development of self-sufficiency, ultimately helping program participants overcome obstacles and actively participate in society. This program is a remarkable program that we've had the great privilege as an institution to work with here locally. Our staff have offered college and career advising, professional staff here working with the organization to support this community. Our students have championed the awareness of the program here locally in Orange County through volunteer activities that they've participated in. And as a result of these efforts, and this is a partnership that we've sort of engaged in, I would say, over the last 6-7 years, we've successfully been able to encourage students to apply to college and actually been able to retain students here on our campus as a result of these efforts. And so I think what's really important to understand about this partnership and the Welcome Corps experience is that this is meaningful work. It's work that needs to be done. If planned out properly, it can be a huge success. Some just feedback. Last thing I'll mention is that, if I had advice for new schools looking to engage in the process, As already mentioned by my colleagues, Chris at IU, you know, researching the current resources on your institution and your organizational structure, and really understanding the strengths and perhaps the gaps that need to be sort of filled in a process like this is really important first step. Hosting meetings with various stakeholders is critical on campus to ensure that, again, it's being well thought through in terms of its delivery. Funding, of course, is always a huge obstacle, I think, whenever looking at a program like this. And I think it's important to understand and know if you're going to ask for funding at various organizational structures, whether it be the president or the CFO's office, what you're asking for specifically. Welcome Corps provided a really nice budget sheet that allowed for us to sort of organize where we felt we might have to think about what support might look like. Of course, we know that these students would be eligible for federal financial aid, but how is that that funding gap going to be met? Our tuition and housing being cut, fully covered, our indirect costs being accounted for, travels, books and supplies. And those are some things that I would say really to think about in regards to this particular program or any similar type of program in terms of supporting students who are looking to go to college. And then, of course, another thing I would say is if you have a grant writer on campus, that would be a really good person to become a friend with, because there's many philanthropic organizations that are looking to give to causes like this to help support students way to college. That'd be a really good friend to have on campus if you have that. And then, of course, planning for the long haul is always important. Remember that a program or supporting these students isn't just a one-year attempt. The idea typically is to look at the long haul and ensure that the students can actually successfully graduate, and thinking about that context in mind is important as well. Last thing I'll say is just be patient with the process. Always remember your why, why you're doing this. And I think it'll be a good experience. So thanks.
Before we get to the Q&A, we just wanted to share that talent is everywhere, opportunity is not, and that's really sort of the driving ethos behind Welcome Corps on campus. And that enrolling refugee students unleashes talent and spurs new opportunities for campuses. So, of course, when you welcome a student, it changes their life, and it's a huge opportunity for them. But I think IU and SoCo would also share that once those students come to campus, it really enriches that environment, and the campus benefits tremendously as well. So just with that sentiment, we'd like to open it up for Q&A, and I think I'll hand it back to Belma to moderate all of that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Christina. We have 2 questions in our Q&A, and I will go ahead and read aloud the first question, and I will open it up to anyone that'd like to answer. If we have a question, it says, do agencies working with colleges and universities to recruit foreign students may be qualified to support these refugee students, especially if they have great recruiting, retaining, and integration services to offer? If not, how can such agencies support? Would like to take a stab at this.
So is the question, are outside agencies, foreign agencies required to support these refugee students?
The way I'm reading it is, I think they're asking, are agents able to be part of the sponsor groups if they help them get to a university? Is that correct, Richard? So I think that's more of a question for Welcome Corps.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jane Roach. I'm the program manager with the National Association of Higher Education Systems, and I'm part of the mobilization team. If I'm understanding the question correctly, well, currently, the recruiting agency is technically World University Services Canada. They're the ones who do the identification overseas. So they're technically the recruiting agency, if you want to call them, that's the appropriate name for them. We also have another way that campus sponsor groups can sponsor students through the Refer a Student program. This is where campuses can actually refer a student that they have identified themselves to the program. And so, you know, I think that it's possible that a recruiting agency could be a part of that process, you know, part of the private sponsor group. But that's something that we would have to maybe explore. We would be happy to have a conversation about that offline. I'm happy to share my email. But otherwise, for the matching program, the identification is done by WUSC. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate it. We have a question about, may you send requirement documentation? Not very sure what the question is pertaining to. If you are a refugee student looking into the Welcome Corps on campus, I am going to post an email that you can reach out to if this is what you were inquiring. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. You also posted the same email. All right. And we have another question, and it is a lengthy question. If you would like to take a moment and read through it before I read it, or, you know, read through it and then try to answer, that would be great. It's just a long question for me to read out loud. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead and answer from our perspective.
Thanks, Chris.
So yeah, so at IU for the first one, so how the process works, and I'll say individual ones, but also on Welcome Corps. So for individual students contacting us, we usually have a conversation to begin with. A lot of our students have friends or family who have connected, or there's a connection to our community or university. So we'll talk to them about where they're currently at, what their current status is. And so we'll kind of figure that out. We'll ask what documentation they have, what level of schooling they've completed, what degree they've completed. So for the first part, we're having that initial question. We do conduct in-house evaluations. So as Delgar and I were mentioning before, most of the evaluation part will come to the International Admissions Office, since these students are coming from international systems, even though the application will be going through Delgar's office in the domestic admissions workflow. So there are not separate thresholds. We still have the same standard admissions requirements as we do for all of our populations at the same level. I will say, however, with that in mind, we do consider more flexible approaches. So, for example, we may have students who don't have complete documentation. So we have a repository of previous verified documents that we can compare scans to. So if a student comes and they just have photocopies, we can work with that. We don't need the official necessarily. There are online verification options. So we're maintaining standards, but we're also being flexible based on the individual student's current situation. With Welcome Corps, most of that's done already. So we're just doing the evaluation piece. The documentation side is kind of completed in that dossier. So we're just evaluating, but it's the same admission standards that we're evaluating. We're just being a bit more flexible. And then just to go over the second point really quick, each student is going to be different in general. So we've had students who are refugee asylee, humanitarian parole, SIV, TPS comes through. We've had a couple F1s who have come through just from international displacement. So again, it's a case-by-case basis. We talk with the individual as they're applying, when they're getting ready to apply, to see what fits best. And then part of our task force that we've created will walk them through that whole process from step one all the way to getting admitted through graduation. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but Welcome Corps will all be approved refugees entering the U.S. on refugee status. So they will just be the single status. Andrew, do you have anything else to add?
Well said, Chris. Similarly, hopefully I'm not on mute. Very sorry. Similarly, we have our own in-house credential evaluation. So the documentation that's provided to us, we actually go through our own process. We have the same standard. Again, we're looking at the context. Again, that's the focus of what our entire review is looking at the context of the student in a holistic manner to ensure that the student can successfully be admitted into the program, or if not, further conversations or documentation is required. But we have a similar process that IU has as well.
And then in terms of the specific determining residency for tuition purposes question, for IU, they are coded as residents, and we actually, as part of the task force, we have somebody from financial aid, financial assistance that's on the task force. So we work closely with them and on our registrar to make sure that they're appropriately coded for tuition purposes, because that is closely tied to funding as well. So, but we, like Chris said, all of them are individual, and just like Andrew said, we also take a holistic review in terms of our application review process for all students. So we're also looking at the context of where they are, when they studied, what they've been able to study, and all of these things in addition to their academic in-house evaluations.
If I could just add to that, specifically for Welcome Corps on campus, refugees, again, as I think Chris mentioned, the students will be on both an education and an immigration pathway. So when they come into the US, they will be required to apply. They will not only be eligible, but they will be required to apply for permanent residency, lawful permanent residency after 1 year of living in the US. And then after 5 years of living in the US, they will be eligible to apply for citizenship. And then so also what this means, given that they're arriving on an immigration pathway, again, they'll be eligible to apply for FAFSA upon arrival. They'll also have work authorization upon arrival. And then in each of your states, you'll also want to check on in-state tuition eligibility. And we can also maybe share a resource on that, so you can check on your states. Thank you.
I want to add for the, oh, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Christine.
For the first part of the question about credential evaluation, we just want to make sure it's clear for anyone considering participating in the program that IIE is always happy to help facilitate connections with different credentialing agencies. So if you find that once you receive a dossier for a student, you do want more support, we're happy and ready to send you to the right people to get whatever you need in order to evaluate those credentials.
And I just wanted to add a piece on the residency part. For our interactions with our residency committee, our state standards, the question of where a student resettles is usually the biggest question. If they're resettling in California and then move to Indiana, that's been more of a conversation. If they're coming directly to Indiana, it's not usually a question. But again, that's something to talk with your institutional residency committee and figure out what your state standards are for students fulfilling that tuition requirement.
Thank you so much. This was great. There is one question here remaining, and the question is, what is required of, and I believe that Warsame talked a little bit about this, what is required for refugee students to apply to the program?
Yeah, student refugee, the requirement is actually it's online, but what the moment is required is you must be living in one of the countries where now the Welcome Corn campus is operating. And currently now it is in Kenya and in Jordan. And to be a registered refugee, recognized by United Nations, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee, and the country of asylum. That means Kenya and Jordan, respectively, and completed high school and have high school diploma, and have a minimum degree grade of C, and be sorry, my light went off, and then also be the age from 18 years to 24, and then just submit your application.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, and let's see, do we have any other questions that I may have?
Sorry, Balma, I forgot to add, and obviously it's clear to be fluent and professionally in English. Be ready to be tested in English language proficiency.
Excellent. Thank you, Warsame. All right. I believe that these are all the questions that we have in our Q&A. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to add your questions to Q&A, or if you want to drop it in chat, that's fine. Wonderful. Okay, so a lot of wonderful resources shared today. With you all, and anything else before we still have plenty of time to talk about the program. Anything else that you would like to share? One thing that I hear a lot from the members is there is an interest, however, how can we, there is always this not being sure how to reach certain resources on campus, or not knowing exactly what the resources are on campus, and how to create the connections within the campus community, as well as, you know, reaching out to the broader community to involve folks into so I'm just curious how maybe Indiana and SoCA, how you've worked as far as gathering different resources, et cetera, to support the refugee students.
Andrew, do you want to go first this time?
Sure. So, you know, the word of the program initially came through our president's office and through the President's Alliance. And, you know, that I think was one important step in terms of seeing the partnership grow and thrive, mainly because I feel like for an initiative like this to occur, not that it has to, it's really ensuring that top leadership is aware of the needs of the population. And so I would say that would be a really good place to start if thinking about joining. But I also think this work is, again, it's about talking about the need within the community in terms of the stakeholders who are also going to be working with students day to day. And so really it's looking at the alignment between those who may be able to make strategic decisions that help support with funding, help support with key processes and enrollment to ensure that the student can actually experience the education on a day-to-day basis, but also as there's a transition to the campus community, that there's a support system there. And so it does require a tremendous amount of thought in that sense, but what I have experienced in my career is that when you have these conversations, you know, at lunch or with your colleagues, it becomes sort of this this thing that will grow. And so as long as you're stewarding that conversation on your campus about what's possible, as opposed to just focusing maybe solely on potential barriers, keeping that conversation going on a college campus and seeking those key stakeholders to actually see how it actually can be delivered on campus is really the first step in terms of the leadership step in supporting the program.
Yeah, and I'll second everything Andrew said. When we started our task force, our main goal was any of these students who have a question, we want them to go to a single spot and be able to get the answer or be able to get help to solve that answer or problem. So kind of twofold. In the beginning, when we set this up, we tried to think about anybody who would need to be involved and just work with them directly. Like I said earlier, tried to identify people who are passionate about the work. All of this is essentially volunteer. It's about people who want to help. It's not in their position description. It's people who want to do above and beyond to help out a specific population. So we really wanted people engaged who were engaged for the long haul. So we identified those individuals, invited them to the task force. And then we also, so essentially, if a student has a question, they go to a single person on our task force, and then she will help them connect to whoever they need to be connected to. The other thing is if a student doesn't necessarily want to talk to a person, we have a website with resources. It's refugee.iu.edu. So a student can get on that website. If there's food insecurity and they don't want to talk to somebody, it provides the address to our food pantry. If they need financial help outside of just their studies. So any community resource we have listed there, and then any major players who could help them. So admissions, immigration advising, anything like that, there's a single source, whether it be a person or a website. There's just one place for that student to go, so they don't have to navigate the bureaucracy of higher ed in the US. Because as Delgar mentioned, it's difficult enough for somebody who grew up here their whole life to navigate. We don't want this population to have to go through those struggles as well.
Well, thank you so much. This was definitely a wealth of information, how individuals can go on campus and look for resources and support the refugee students. I appreciate it. Thank you. I believe that as I'm monitoring the chat, I'm also trying to monitor the Q&A. I think that we have answered all questions. All right. Is there anything else that we'd like to mention? Jane, are you answering the question with the question that came in through from a state university?
The only question I see right here is from Farah, and I believe that Warsami is answering it.
Oh,
Or just
wonderful.
answered it.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we have answered all the questions. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone joining us today and sharing about their experiences working with Welcome Corps on campus. And I appreciate some great questions that came through today. As I said, ACRO is excited to be able to facilitate this conversation and for people to be able to learn more about Welcome Corps on campus. On behalf of ACRO, I want to thank all of our panelists and our attendees for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out to me at ACRO or reach out to anyone here on our panel today. We are excited about this program, and I hope that more people have a chance to look into it. And yes, on behalf of everyone here, I wish you a wonderful Wednesday and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.